Without pollination, it's hard for farms to grow crops. Without bees, it's hard to do pollination. My next two guests conducted research that has reversed an alarming drop in the nation's population of honeybees. For their work, they're finalists in this year's Service to America Medals program. Evans and Judy Chen are researchers at the Agricultural Research Service in Beltsville, Maryland, and they join me now. It's good to have you both on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's begin by setting the scene here, the importance of honeybees to the agricultural economy. Give us a sense of the numbers and the scope of bees in agriculture.
Bees are incredibly important for several reasons. They play a critical role in pollinating many of the food crops we rely on food, contributing to about 1/3 of our food supply. Without bees, many fruit, vegetable, and nuts would become scarce and expensive. The pollination service provided bees are valued $18 billion annually in the U.S. Additionally, honeybee produce honey, bee wax, royal jelly, and other hive products worth $150 million. Bees also support the growth of a variety of plants which absorb carbon dioxide from air, a powerful tool in fight against climate change, and also provide habitat and food for other animals, maintaining biodiversity and healthy ecosystem.
Okay, so we need bees to grow crops, and they do a lot of other good things. And Jay, what has been the trend with bees? I think there have been books published about bee population dangers 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. And to add to the tension of the importance of bees, as Judy mentioned, it's been harder and harder to keep a beehive alive especially over the winter in this climate in the mid-Atlantic and in the northern states. So we have a standing crop of honeybee colonies that commercial beekeepers maintain that's almost exactly as many as are needed for pollination of crops like almonds and blueberries and cranberries, these really critical high-value crops. So we're nervous anytime that the bee losses are higher because if they drop below that threshold, we won't get as much fruit and nut production.
And how does it work? I mean, you have blueberry farm here or some kind of a fruit tree farm there, and there are beekeepers. How do the bees know where to go? Sounds like a naive question, but how does that work?
So the bees can go 2 miles from their homes. So that's not very far when you're talking about American agriculture. So the beekeepers do the hard work, and they drive their beehives across the country back and forth at the whim of the farmers. So if a farmer requires pollination for apples or cranberries or almonds, the beekeepers put their colonies on a truck, bundle them up, and follow that. So they're following a bloom of agriculture literally back and forth across the country.
So the implication there is that beekeeping is a skill and craft unto itself. Otherwise, farmers would have a barn full of beehives.
That's right. Yeah. It's not economical generally for the farmers to maintain so many beehives year-round.
Sure. All right, let's talk about what's happened to the bees that led and sparked the research you've been doing for some time now. What's been going on with the U.S. population of bees and beehives?
Well, since 2006, on average, about 32 to 35% of bee colonies have been lost each year in the U.S., which is much higher than 15 to 18% loss rate that is considered economically sustainable. So bee losses has been a very serious problem.
All right, and tell us about the research then. How do you go about beginning the search for what is causing, and when bee collapses, that is a box of bees or a hive, just one day they're all dead?
That's right. And we've traveled, Judy and I have traveled to California, Florida, Pennsylvania following these events and collected samples. And our specialty is really on disease. So we see the world through that lens, I would say, more often than not. And so we'll collect them to check for viruses and gut parasites and bacteria, things like that. Being fully aware that there are also pesticide stresses on bees and nutritional stress. So when you get a big collapse, like a commercial beekeeper losing most of their hives, it's usually a combination of things. The last trigger is often a disease of some sort. And Judy was the first on the scene, and I followed her into viruses because viruses are there more often than not. And we really think they're vital in the losses of honeybee colonies.
We're speaking with Jay Evans. He's a lead scientist, and Judy Chen is a research leader at the Agricultural Research Service. They are both finalists in this year's Service to America Medals program. And Judy, tell us about then how you go about the research. You take bees and put them under a microscope, dissect them. Tell us about the research.
So we consider ourselves as a bee doctor. So we diagnose a wide range of bee diseases, including viruses, bacteria, and fungi. So we utilize advanced technology such as PCR, also, microscope, genetic sequence, and other microbiological assays. Those methods allow us to understand their impact on bee health and develop targeted treatment and management strategy to ensure the well-being of honeybee.
So there is a genetic component to this research. You can see resistance and so forth in the genetic makeup of a bee.
And certainly in the genetic makeup of the viruses, that's a lot like the SARS-CoV-2 virus. There's variants of these viruses that are more virulent, more harmful to the bees than others. And so we use the genetics to say, you have this flavor, and that helps explain some of the losses, I would say.
And that poses the difficulty of how do you find a counter to a virus, because antibiotics for something that's not virus, a microbe, is one thing, but finding something to stop a virus, as we know, that's not so easy.
Oh, yeah. So we treating bee virus using several novel and environmentally safe approach. They include using natural product from plant. Those have antimicrobial effect, can help boost the honeybee's immune system, directly combat pathogen. So we also use targeted gene silence technology called RNAi to silence a specific gene in pathogen that infect the bee. Those methods involve, introduce some double-strand RNA into the bee, which trick honeybees, antimicrobial response, effectively neutralize the pathogen without harming bee.
Right, so this is not an antibacterial treatment, but an antiviral treatment that you have developed.
Right. But, for the natural product, they boost the honeybee immunity, so they actually help honeybee to combat various pathogens, including bacteria and viruses.
And did you also look at mechanisms for getting these developed substances into the beehives? Because there's an infrastructure issue, right, for the bee industry.
Yeah, that's true. Everything we test and attempt to treat with, we have to, one, know it's safe, of course, for bees and humans, but the next step is how do you deliver it? And fortunately, beekeepers are used to feeding bees kind of an icing sugar, a patty of sugar that goes on top of the hive when there's a dearth of flowers, for example, or they're traveling. And we found that we can mix these medicines into that, and the bees will gobble it up in a day or two even, and hopefully get it presented with the medicine. But that's a big challenge. The primary one is, of course, to make sure that what we're developing is very safe for the bees and for us.
Yeah, you've answered one question I had. What is it bees eat? And they eat sugar, basically?
They would prefer honey or nectar, yeah. So their diet is built around pollen and nectar, and that has been for millions of years. Beekeepers have found they can supplement that with pollen supplements or protein supplements even that aren't pollen-based, and sucrose, regular sugar. So it is possible to keep them going. They're not as happy as they are when they're eating their own plants.
Right. So often the honey is extracted, though, for commercial purposes. So you have to, in other words, fill back in what the bees would eat when you take their honey for putting in little squeezed bears.
Yeah, you're ready to be a beekeeper. That's exactly what happens.
All right, so what has happened? How far has the treatment program gone, and what's the state of the bee populations now?
So beekeeper has the way to pull back the bee population by split the colony into two and introduce new queen, but it's just the cost increase the beekeeping industry.
Well, but population collapse, has that stopped, and are they stable now?
Still, the winter bee losses and also right now summer bee losses, both are very serious situation.
It is true that the beekeepers have maintained the same population for decades now. That's with a lot of labor, a lot of hard work, but they have met the pollination demands. Our worry, as you recall, 20 years ago, the worry was that this was a downward slide that we couldn't escape, that the bees would go, if not extinct, to low levels. But thanks to the beekeepers, really, they nurse them back to health and build them at least enough to manage the minimum of pollination.
Right, so the desire or the goal would be for less effort to keep up the same bee population.
Exactly.
A lower rate of replacing the dead bees with fresh ones. And if you get more out of the bees you have, it would be more efficient.
Precisely, yeah. And Judy and I have several excellent colleagues who are also looking at contagion within the hive. So how do these viruses move? And so instead of medicines, if